Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance webinar. This webinar's title is Opportunities for Partnerships that Create Good Jobs and Address Equity through here are the acronyms, IRA, known as IRA, IIJA, and CHIPS, CHIPS, the CHIPS Act. Next slide, please. Michelle, thank you all for joining again. We really appreciate you taking time to join our webinars as we continue to promote the series of the key recommendations and offering some practical solutions for you. I am Janelle Hills, the Director of Workforce Development with Interstate Renewable Energy Council. And IREC is a national nonprofit working to remove barriers to the deployment of clean energy for all Americans. We do this through state regulatory reform, local initiatives, such as our Soul Smart program, which helps community around the U.S. accelerate their solar and workforce development. So again, thank you for joining. This webinar is being recorded. Next slide, please, Michelle. Again, I'm Janelle Hills. I am being led by Cindy and other leadership within IREC. Cindy is the Vice President for Workforce Strategy and Innovation. And we have today with us Doug Bloch, who is a principal at Bloch Strategies, who will be giving some very insightful information. So thank you, Doug, for joining us today. Just going to take a few minutes, next slide, please, to go over today's agenda. As usual, we talk a little bit about the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance, and I'll share some information about the launch of the Green Workforce Connect platform that's newly developed here at IREC, and provide some information about apprenticeships in clean energy. That is our ACE network. It's a registered apprenticeship program offered through the Department of Labor through a contract we recently received. So I'll provide some information on that as well. And then again, we will hear from our presenter today, from Doug. We ask that you hold all of your questions until the very end, where we will have a question and answer session, the last 30 minutes of the webinar. So make notes, take notes, and flag your questions if you have an epiphany of something throughout the webinar. Next slide, please, Michelle. If you're on this webinar, you're likely to know workforce development does not happen by chance. This is a very intentional effort. In order to rapidly scale a diverse and sustainable clean energy workforce, we need to leverage best practices, resources, and create strong partnerships. That's why we want everyone to come out of your silos and connect with us, connect with other organizations. We work to be the connector, to connect the dots and address clean energy workforce development more holistically, focusing on every aspect of workforce development landscape, from new learner to worker recruitment, through employer partnership development and recruitment, which is a very important piece to the puzzle. Next slide, please. The National Workforce Alliance has 3 strategic areas of focus: training, education, and credentialing, funding and program design, recruitment and support of workers and learners, and employer recruitment and retention. Next slide, please, Michelle. Just want to make note of our LinkedIn page. Avery will be dropping a link to our LinkedIn page and the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance website. There are past webinars listed on our website. Please take a moment and go through both of these links and share on LinkedIn. If you have something exciting happening within your prospective organizations. That's really a place where you can find a lot of great information that's happening around the nation with our partners. We have over 300 organizations who are a part of this alliance, and we're working to grow that. And it's growing every day. You can also subscribe to the upcoming events on the websites as you review the past webinars and information we have listed there. Next slide, please. The National Clean Energy Alliance webinar series always happens the third Thursday of each month, with the exception of December and April. December, holiday season. April is just a busy conference time. I think I am at a conference the whole month, every week in April. The 2024 topics, you're here for the union partnerships. Next month, we will have the Registered Apprenticeship ACE Network highlighted, so you can learn more about Department of Labor apprenticeships, what it takes to become a registered apprenticeship sponsor, how to work with intermediaries, and how to develop standards. So you don't want to miss that webinar. After that, we will unfold the Green Workforce Connect, the Weatherization Assistance Program. This is Green Workforce Connect is really the workforce development strategy at IREC, and we are going to build upon that. So that will be a great webinar to attend. And following that, we will have a DEIA contractor workshop and kind of provide information on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility to ensure we're operating within that and laying some groundwork and developing the foundation for your diversity, equity, inclusion efforts. Next slide, please. Next week, we'll be launching Green Workforce Connect, our new platform for home weatherizations. This is a unique online platform where job seekers, students, contractors, local employers, and training providers in the home weatherization industry will be able to connect. Green Workforce Connect is designed to facilitate career connections in weatherization. This is a pilot phase. It covers 3 states, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. This is, I think Avery is dropping a link in the chat, so you can go there to identify what's going to be happening in this webinar that we will be launching pretty soon. Next slide, please. Oh, here it is. There we go. QR code, weatherization professionals and contractor with workforce development. We're recruiting weatherization professionals. You can register here. That will happen on January 25th, 2024. A lot of hard work went into developing this platform. So it's an exciting initiative that you definitely want to be a part of. Next slide, please. As I stated earlier, Apprenticeships in Clean Energy ACE Network is a national coalition of industry, training, and workforce development leaders who are expanding registered apprenticeships for clean energy. That's what we're doing in a nutshell. You can learn more by attending the Alliance webinar in February. So you want to make sure you're there. If there's any interest in registered apprenticeship programs, here listed on the screen, you can see all of our partners. I won't name them, just know that we have a deep partnership with a large breadth of companies, and we are working to develop those programs in clean energy, registered apprenticeship programs. Next slide, please. Now that all of that is out the way, kind of giving you some updates on what IREC is doing, I want to introduce to you Doug Bloch, who is the principal of Bloch Strategies. Thank you, Doug, for joining us today again. And he's going to be talking about opportunities for partnerships that create good jobs and address equity through the IRA, IIJA, and the CHIPS Act. Doug, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Hills, and thank you, IREC, for the opportunity to present this morning. This is a very hot and timely topic. And a little bit about me first before I begin. As Dr. Hills said, my name is Doug Bloch. This is actually my 30th year doing this work. And for most of that time, I've worked directly for labor unions. But beginning last year, I went out on my own, and I currently serve as an advisor to the U.S. Department of Energy and many labor unions, philanthropy, and community-based organizations, all working at the intersection of jobs and our public investments. So before I begin, I want to go over the goals of my presentation today. The first is to understand the policies that the federal government, particularly the DOE, is using to promote quality jobs and equity and to combat climate change. Second is to understand the power and the opportunities behind community benefits plans, as well as the limitations. And third, I want to talk about how to engage in the process. Next slide, please. So the Biden administration, and most people know this, but the administration's leading the largest investment in infrastructure since the New Deal. And collectively, these three bills on the screen here represent trillions of dollars coming down to our local communities, to businesses, government agencies, and workers. The first is the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which is up there as the IIJA. And as it says, this is over $1 trillion spread across 10 federal agencies and 380 federal programs. 665 million of that is being managed by the U.S. Department of Transportation, by the way. And most of the focus of this money is on infrastructure, including water, highways, roads, bridges, railroads, public transit, airports, ports, broadband internet, and much more. The second is the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, which is almost $400 billion in loans and tax credits, direct spending that's running through 11 agencies. And this money really tilts more towards climate. So this is for clean energy and power projects, hydrogen, nuclear, wind power, grid modernization. IRA funding is building a whole new industry as we move to electrify cars, buses, trucks, and trains. And this involves everything from taking lithium out of the ground to processing it, manufacturing it into batteries, and building the charging infrastructure to support it. There's also IRA money for carbon sequestration, decarbonizing buildings, and much more. And then finally, the CHIPS and Science Act is funding to boost domestic research and the manufacturing of semiconductor chips. The scope and scale of all of these combined investments are really staggering, and many organizations are tracking where the money's going, and we can put you in touch with people who can make that information available, but honestly, it's too much. And while none of us here can expect to be on top of all of it, there is one common theme that runs through all these programs, and that's the administration's push to use this funding to create good-paying union jobs for workers in disadvantaged communities. And this is really where we can take advantage of partnerships to give people and organizations a competitive edge in landing the funding. Next slide, please. So let's talk about what tools the federal agencies are using to achieve their goals. And namely, that's prevailing wage, apprenticeships, and community benefits. This includes a mix of mandates and incentives. On the mandate side, the agencies are requiring contractors on construction projects pay prevailing wage. And that's true for all the programs where direct funding's involved. And this is really good because it sets a level playing field for the labor costs up front. The The programs also create, IIJA in particular, creates multiple opportunities for states to use portions of the money to invest in workforce development, from pre-apprenticeship to apprenticeship and on-the-job training. And this also gives states the ability to layer mandates on top of the federal ones. For example, here in California, where I live, last year, the state set aside $50 million of the federal funding to put into the state's high road construction careers program. The CHIPS Act takes a slightly different approach. In this case, the Commerce Department believes that semiconductors are actually a national security issue. And so they want to make sure that these projects are delivered in an efficient and costly manner with minimal labor disputes. And to that end, they are encouraging the use of project labor agreements on all construction projects. Applicants that don't commit to using a PLA will be required to submit workforce continuity plans to show they've taken other measures to reduce the risk of delays in the project delivery. And additionally, in the CHIPS Act, any companies that get over $150 million have to submit plans to provide everybody building the facilities or working in the facilities with access to affordable and high quality childcare. And then finally, most recently, the Biden administration just adopted a new rule for construction projects, as it says, where the federal government is investing $35 million or more. Those will be required to have project labor agreements. This is a very, very big rule for building and construction trade unions. Okay, next slide, please. So, as I said, prevailing wage is the floor that every project must meet under all the programs, but prevailing wages does not guarantee that these are going to be good jobs, let alone jobs for our local communities. And also committing to pay prevailing wage is not going to give any applicant a competitive advantage against other proposals. So this is really where the government is using incentives. They can't require contractors to pay prevailing wage or utilize registered apprenticeships programs when the applicants are only getting tax credits or loans. But to encourage them, contractors who agree to do it will get increased tax credits up to 5 times. So in general, the formula for these tax credits are 30% if you pay prevailing wage and utilize registered apprenticeships, 6% if you don't, and that's a very strong incentive. These rules are aiming to address job quality issues on the construction side, and while they do tilt the deck towards union contractors and their workers, on their own, they don't do anything to make sure that people in disadvantaged communities have access to those jobs. So, and they also don't set any standards for the permanent operations jobs that will be created through these projects. And those are jobs that in many cases have much lower barriers to entry than construction jobs. So this is where the federal agencies are asking for community benefits plans. And as you dig into this subject, you'll see community benefits plans, community benefits agreements, and to some extent they're interchangeable. But let me give you the Department of Energy's definition of a community benefit agreement. It says this is an agreement signed by community benefits groups and a developer identifying the community benefits, a developer agrees to deliver in return for community support of the project. Community benefit groups are coalitions comprised of neighborhood associations, faith-based organizations, unions, environmental groups, and other stakeholders. They represent the interests of residents who will be impacted by proposed developments. CBAs can ensure that measurable local benefits will be given to a community. They're enforceable, legally binding contracts for all parties that stipulate community benefits and are the direct result of substantial community input. And I'll drop that in the chat later. Next slide, please. So it's in everybody's mutual, oh, I'm sorry, next slide after that, sorry. So it's in everybody's mutual interest to work together. The administration wants strong partnerships to create good jobs, deliver successful projects, and mitigate the impacts of climate change. Community groups want good jobs and the environmental benefits. Labor unions want new members and more work for their existing members. Employers want the project funding and the political support from the labor and community stakeholders as they work their way through a permitting process. And state and local governments want to capture federal funding for the work. And a strong community benefits agreement goes a long way towards that. So this is really an opportunity for people to do things that they normally wouldn't do. Next slide, please. So let's look at what the Department of Energy in particular is asking for in community benefits plans. And as you can see, the subjects are broken into 4 broad categories that deal with jobs and equity. But let me give you a more detailed breakdown of what they're asking of the applicants than this slide does. They want to see engagement with labor unions, workforce development organizations, impacted communities, and tribes. Second, they ask how many construction and operations jobs will be created. They want metrics. They ask if these are going to be quality jobs based on the Department of Labor's Good Jobs Toolkit. And that covers things like fair pay, benefits, representation, recruitment from disadvantaged communities, opportunities for advancement, safe working conditions, and job security. They ask, will disadvantaged workers have equitable access to these jobs? What are the investments in training programs? Is there a commitment to worker rights, including the free and fair choice to join a union? And of course, alignment with Justice 40 principles, which is where the environmental benefits come in. Next slide, please. So again, and I think this is important, especially for the government agencies to understand as you think about your own programs. This is not a requirement, but in many of the DOE's grants, there's competitive scoring. And so the applicant's community benefits plan accounts for 20% of their score, and that's a huge incentive. And of course, they weigh things like the commitment to community benefits against things like technical viability, financing, but it's a huge incentive. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the different phases for this. The first is the Department of Energy is pushing out these funding opportunity announcements. The solicitations go out and they invite applicants to submit concept papers, which are reviewed by merit reviewers. The DOE is still pushing out these FOAs, but actually over 90% of the funding has initially been awarded. So they're in this pre-award phase, or actually the next phase, which is the post-selection, as you see here. So this is after you submit a concept paper and your project gets initial selection, that's when the applicants are going into negotiations, which is where most of them are at right now. We get access to what they made a summary of what they committed to do in terms of community benefits. But for any tribal governments here or unions or community-based groups who are on this webinar, now is the time for you to engage with these companies because they're in negotiations and they need to show something to the DOE to get their final funding. And then there's the post-award, and there's really a big question mark on how this is going to work. but I'm going to get into this need for legally binding agreements and enforcement. And one other thing I will say about the post-award phase is that it also affords an opportunity because all of these projects need to go through local permitting, and that's a challenge. Some of these projects are being challenged by the local communities, and these applicants need the sort of support that comes along with these community benefits plans. Okay, next slide. So I don't want to pretend that a community benefits plan or agreement is the be all end all. It doesn't include all of the things that communities care about, such as affordable housing, money for schools, for parks, but it can. That's up to the negotiating parties. And as the slide says, it has to be enforceable. The administration is encouraging the applicants to sign legally binding community benefits agreements and legally binding agreements with labor unions, independent of the Department of Energy. This is a bit of a challenge because we're in a chicken and egg scenario. The companies are reluctant to commit to doing anything prior to getting the funding award. So we're really encouraging people to sign MOUs to negotiate contingent on getting the funding. And so far, most of the focus from the applications has been on forming community advisory committees and commitments to do community engagement and negotiate agreements during the first or second phases of their projects after they receive the funding. The DOE and the stakeholders they care about on the community and labor side want more. So again, I would point back to these MOUs. One other thing is that these applications can write in a robust community engagement process. And the good proposals we're seeing are capturing parts of the funding to support participation and enforcement by the different stakeholders once the funding's secured. And we can refer you to consultants who can help you design a good process. And obviously the good proposals spell out metrics and remedies for non-compliance. And finally, I would just say that all of this really hinges on the strength of your coalition, especially the labor, community, local government, and employer coalitions. I've done merit reviewing as a volunteer on these, and there are a whole army of us subject matter experts in community benefits and labor issues who are going through these proposals with a fine-tooth comb. Okay, next slide. So I want to give an example. Oh, yes, I saw something in the chat. I'm going to get back to that. Thank you there. So I want to give an example of a community benefits campaign that I was involved in here in Oakland. This was a really large project. It was a redevelopment of the former Oakland Army base, which sits next to the Port of Oakland, which is one of the largest container ports in the country and the largest export-based port on the West Coast. So very strategic project to build logistics and warehousing that ties into the port. The West Oakland community next to the port is primarily a community of color, historically was an African American community who hadn't captured a lot of the jobs at the port, but got all the pollution from the ships, the trains, the trucks, and everything that was running in and out of the port. And so this was an opportunity to right a historic wrong. So this Revive Oakland coalition of community groups and labor unions came together, and one really a huge commitment and a huge win in terms of community benefits. What ended up happening was this project got approved that's going to create thousands of jobs. The jobs policies, one, include things like targeted local hire, ban the box policies so that folks from disadvantaged communities and with criminal backgrounds have access to those jobs, a living wage floor, limitations on the use of temp workers, a community oversight board where different stakeholders have a role. There was a wall-to-wall project labor agreement on the whole project with goals to bring people from the local community into the apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs. And finally, the city invested seed funding, which was followed up by a $500,000 grant from the state of California to invest in a one-stop career center so that people from the West Oakland community could just go to one place to get access to the jobs, to all the job training programs, and so that employers on the former Oakland Army base had one place to go to find workers. And so it really was a huge win and very important to the supply chain. And at that, I would love to get into the Q&A. So I'm going to stop the presentation portion here and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Doug. Let's see, get my video on. I was like, it won't come on. So thank you for that information, Doug. We do have a few questions in the question and answer box. Adam Flint stated, they have waded through the long list of IRA and allied NOFOs and produced a list of NOFOs that are relevant to this subject. And if so, can you share that? So he's asking if you have produced a list that is relevant to this subject.
So I am happy to report, and they are listed as a resource slide, which I actually think is the next slide. My apologies for not reminding, asking you to move to the next slide. This will be in the slide deck. The UC Berkeley, University of California, Berkeley Labor Center is working on a database that will make it easy in answer to these two questions here about how to find who's getting the money, including in places like Los Angeles, will make it easier for you to get access to that information. And I'm happy to directly connect anybody who's in this webinar with folks at UC Berkeley.
Thank you, Doug.
Yep.
Eugene Lewis asks, is there a way to find companies in our local area in Los Angeles?
Yeah, and that was also, I tried to answer the first two questions there together. So yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I think in response to the next question, if was the question about the Oakland Army base or I would say the key labor unions on the national level who are really involved in all these funding programs that I've talked about are obviously building all the affiliates of the national building trades. So some of them are on, I saw in the chat, I saw the IBEW, the electrical workers, I saw LIUNA, the laborers. All the construction unions are engaged in this at the national level, as well as their affiliates on the ground. And again, I would be happy, my contact information's in here. I would be happy to connect people with folks at the North American Building Trades Unions as well. On the operations side, especially in the battery supply chain and chips, you have unions like the United Auto Workers, the United Steel Workers, you have the Machinist Union, you have actually the Communications Workers of America, particularly on chips. So they are really looking at these operations jobs. Uh, Dr. Hills, do you want me to just go down through these questions?
Yes, just go ahead. You have access to the
Okay, great.
Q&A. Go ahead.
Um, all right, I'm looking at Adam's Flint question. Huh. Well, that's an interesting question. Um, I do really think there are challenges, particularly in the residential sector, to his point that there's very low union density, even in places like California and New York and Seattle, when it comes to residential work. And a lot of the construction unions don't have separate residential rates. I'm sorry, this is a question about workforce development funding from Adam Flint for training for most of the residential sector, the vast majority, which is non-union. So he's correct. And this is actually a challenge, and is going to take some work with employers, with the unions that are in the residential space. And we're starting to get some stuff going in California around decarbonization. That could be a whole different webinar. So but thank you for flagging that issue. So Tracy Wallace asked, how can a small training operation in lowest income communities in this case in Dallas, Austin, Houston participate and identify the developers? Again, I would connect you with some folks at the Labor Center. There's a lot of money going into Texas, particularly in hydrogen. And Austin is a huge priority for the CHIPS Act office. And so there really are some opportunities there. Jim Marchiori asks, is there a template for community benefits agreements that may be available? I'm going to refer you to Jobs to Move America on the resources, who are launching a community benefits resource center. And they're going to be a great place to go to find things like templates and assistance in negotiating community benefits agreements. Eugenie Lewis, where can you find training programs for clean energy jobs? I would start actually by contacting your local building trades council. And again, we can help you find that as well. The training programs for the operations jobs are being developed as we speak, like for the battery supply chain jobs. So those don't necessarily exist yet. Okay. Adam Flint is hoping that the Berkeley database is useful. I hope it helps as well. And again, a lot of people are trying to compile this information, and it's a lot. Okay. This may have been asked, Janine Robinson. For DOE post-award, is there a list? Is this national? Does it tell you what phase of the award they're in? Please share. I'd like to access. Again, the Berkeley database is going to make it available so that if you're in Louisiana, you can click on that database. You'll be able to see who got the initial award and what they committed to in terms of community benefits plans, just a summary. And Maurice Hill asked for Georgia. So good, this is high demand. All right, I'm going to keep going down. Lauren Friedman, are there opportunities for workforce development outside of construction roles to create accessible pathways into clean energy and related business, admin, development, entrepreneurship, etc.? This may actually be a question for Dr. Hills, because I do believe there are organizations that are helping more on the business development side. That's not something that I'm involved in, and maybe IREC is actually.
Yeah, I would be interested to know, are you looking for organizations or are you just looking for workforce development occupations outside of construction roles. If you're looking for those occupations, IREX Career Maps would be a great starting point for you. And if you're not, then maybe you can shoot me an email. I'll drop my email address in the chat for you to clarify regarding the organizations that you're looking for, Lauren.
Okay, I'm going to keep moving down. There was a question about the slides being shared after the webinar, which they will be. Adam Flint returned to this very real issue around residential work and developing these sort of partnerships. And again, I agree with Mr. Flint. It is a problem. But as I said, there are some good models out there where it's happening, and glad to talk about those offline. Sharon Brown wanted to flag a Department of Energy community benefits webinar and a template. Thank you for that. Very good and very useful. Ralph Ibarra asked to connect. He is a Justice 40 Accelerator cohort. I would love to connect. So looking forward to that. Azari Jones, would any of these be appropriate for funding support for a startup ed tech company developing VR software for wind turbine technicians? I'm also in Texas and looking to expose underserved communities. You know, I do think there are some opportunities there with the whole onshore and offshore wind industry. There are huge investments going into that. And I really do believe there are partnership opportunities. It's going to create a lot of jobs, and they need partners, particularly from underserved communities, because in many of these communities, these projects are getting pushed back for the onshore wind. Tom Byrne says, Tom Byrne was responding to somebody else's question about a training series they have for EV technicians. So that's great. And just, I would say, I saw some folks from IBEW here. You know, the IBEW and all the other unions, but particularly in the EV industry, you know, a lot of this work to build out the charging infrastructure is being done by members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers who have really well-developed apprenticeship programs in virtually every part of the United States. And so would encourage people to reach out to IBEW if you have interest in the EV. Okay, Destiny Murrell asks, can you speak more about an MOU versus a CBP when working with unions? That's a very good question. So, and if I didn't, I think I was remiss in mentioning this. So a developer could sign a project labor agreement, but I do think it's important to note the difference between a project labor agreement and what's often referred to as a community workforce agreement. And the difference is a community workforce agreement is a project labor agreement. And what the PLA does is all the workers hired on a project labor agreement come through the union hiring hall. And all of the companies working on that, whether they're contractors or subcontractors, agree to use union labor for that project, pay prevailing wage, pay the benefits. The advantage to the project is that the unions do the compliance work to make sure everybody's getting paid the wages that they own, that they deserve. And when you have a community workforce agreement, what you layer on top of that is targeted local hire. So you're setting goals to bring people from the local communities or disadvantaged communities into the apprenticeship programs and pre-apprenticeship programs that often offer wraparound services for people. And again, you've got the unions doing the compliance work for that. People could sign an MOU to agree to negotiate a project labor agreement, but that just touches just the construction jobs. And so what a lot of these applicants are doing now for the operations jobs, which come under a community benefits plan, is to say, look, we haven't built this project yet. We don't know how many workers we're going to need. We don't know how many jobs it's going to produce or exactly what the jobs are. So we're going to state to the Department of Energy that if and when our workers decide they want to organize unions, we're just going to stay neutral. And so right now, what people can do if they don't have the funding yet is to just sign these MOUs to say, we're going to agree to negotiate, and they can outline the terms of those negotiations. And the advantage is you don't necessarily have to commit to everything and raise expectations if you don't, before you get the funding. So I hope that answers that question. And then finally, last question I see here is Richard Sebastian. What role is or can higher ed play in these partnerships? Thank you for mentioning that. There is absolutely a role, and if you look at a lot of these applications, particularly for community colleges, but in many cases, higher ed as well, to help people on the workforce development side. And so in many places, this is also involves partnering with certified apprenticeship programs with the unions. And I would point to a very good example being the hydrogen project here in California that was negotiated and funded by the Department of Energy. And this project includes all the unions on the construction side. There are really specific targeted local hire goals to bring people from disadvantaged communities into those jobs. There are education and career pathways to push people up from entry-level jobs into higher ed. The partnerships involve higher ed and community colleges and state agencies that are investing in the hydrogen projects, and of course the unions and the community groups. It's a really good model, probably one I should have referred to instead of the Oakland Army base. So let's see. And then Adam Flint had a question for IREC.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Adam, I have already copied your question and comment and sent that up the chain. So if we do decide to make any efforts in this space, I have your email address. I'll be reaching out.
And can I ask Michelle to go to the next slide just to share my contact information too? Oh. Okay. Well, I can put my contact information in the chat.
No, it's there.
Oh,
it's there, Doug.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to plug that the ACE Network, the DOL industry intermediary contract will be leading the webinar next month, third Thursday from 2 to 3:30 Eastern time. So these are some of our partners. We won't have all of them present, but we will be providing information on what it takes to become an employer sponsor or join a group sponsor project, learn more about registered apprenticeships. So it's an exciting call. Just wanted to remind you all that this was happening in February, the third Thursday of the month. If you subscribe to the updates, you'll be receiving some correspondence about that. And now we can go to Doug's information. I kind of slid my slide in. Oh, nope, that's question and answer. Now we can go to Doug's information. There we are. There you go, Doug.
Thank you. And, I'm just going through the chat, some really good stuff in here. I think it's worth returning to two other questions when looking at this. One is about who can get trained. Anybody can get trained here. And any company can sign an agreement and be party to a project labor agreement. So I want to emphasize the point here that everybody has access to these training programs, and particularly with the union training programs and apprenticeship programs, how many seats there are for students in these programs there's a direct correlation between that and how much work there is. So the more work there is, the more people can get access to these good paying jobs that we care about with benefits. And then finally, and I'm glad I shared my contact information. What we're seeing on the ground everywhere is, and we saw this a little bit in the webinar, there's too much information, too much money coming out, too many press releases from the federal government. People need help on the ground figuring out what money should I be looking at? Who do I need to be talking to from labor? Who do I need to be talking to from community? What employers should I be talking to? What should I be doing as a government agency to encourage these partnerships? And really just want to encourage you to contact me as myself and my partner with support of philanthropy are building out a team to offer that sort of technical assistance to hopefully field those sort of questions. And I really appreciate just looking through the chat, all the work that people are already doing on the ground who hopefully have the capacity to take advantage of these historical opportunities. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug. You offered a lot of great information. We had a lot of questions in the Q&A option and a whole conversation going on in the chat, and that always happens on this webinar. So we will be sharing the slides. The webinar will be posted on the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance page located on IRA's website. My email address has been dropped in the chat. If you have any questions, if you want to connect, please feel free to do so. Reach out to Doug for questions about this presentation because 10 times out of 10, I am not going to know the answer. But we do have a great relationship, and Doug will likely be happy to answer any questions that the attendees may have in the future and have had on this call. So thank you all for joining the National Clean Energy Workforce Alliance webinar. We really appreciate your time and participation, and we look forward to seeing you in February as we discuss the ACE Network registered apprenticeship programs.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doug.
All right.
Great webinar.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Take care.